It's time for the RotoWire Rundown. My name's Keith Stewart from Read the Line. I am, of course, joined by my cohort in crime, the one, the only, Mr. Len Hochberg, award-winning scribe over there at RotoWire, lead golf analyst. Len, how are you on this fine mountain morning I have out here in Denver?
I am high, but not mile high like you are. No, I'm doing well and looking forward to this. Looking forward to seeing this course and looking forward to seeing who can get to East Lake next week. But you are on the ground there. So what's the deal? What's going on?
Well, there's a little bit of a buzz here because the PGA Tour themselves, as we know, came here from 1986 to 2006 and played an event called the International. Now, it sat on the schedule usually the week after the PGA Championship in August, and it was a Stableford event. So it was one of those, like a break after a major. Never had the best fields because it was the week after a major championship. Tiger didn't play here, but we do have a couple guys in the field this week that have competed here for the International. Two guys, and oddly enough, they're both Australians. Jason Day came here in his rookie season back in 2006, and then Adam Scott was here back in 2000, if you can believe it, right? But we're looking at Castle Pines Golf Club and over 8,000 yards on the scorecard. But before we get to the primer or the preview for this week, let's go back and let's talk a little bit about the St. Jude. We had some movement on the board. We were discussing this last week. Who could jump in from 50 to 70 and get into the top 50 and then play this week for the BMW? We had three guys do it. How do you think that all played out?
Well, I was very surprised that Victor Hovland did it, but he showed that he is still capable of being Victor Hovland.
Yep.
And almost won the dang tournament. And now he's all the way through. He did so well last week. He's going to be guaranteed to be at East Lake to defend his title again next week. So that was a bit of a surprise in that because he just hadn't shown anything. I was back and looking at his stats this past week and yesterday, a matter of fact, and they're just not that bad. They're just not that bad. I mean, except for around the green where he's like 11 billionth place or something like that. He's, top 20 or 25, 30 in all the others. So, maybe in retrospect, Victor Hovland has just been playing better than he's scoring. And we know that's possible. And, we know it's possible to score better than you shoot, than you play and play better than, and he just might be, so I think, he's going to be very interesting the rest of the way. And, and Tom Kim, of course, just needed to go 4 over for the final 3 holes and went 5 over. Just a disastrous end to a pretty bad season overall. He had moments here and there, but sort of had 2 subpar seasons in a row after his big breakthrough a couple of years ago. So I think there's a lot of questions for him going into next year. What about you? What's your takeaway?
Well, Tom Kim was definitely going to be one of them. Just for him to finish bogey double, and he knew what he needed to do. There definitely was a lot more drama, it seemed like, at first around that top 50 cutoff line, which was a lot of fun to watch on Sunday because they had the math right there on the screen. I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed the Eric Cole saga as he was cruising along, and he almost had a chance at Jay Delsing's course record down there at TP Southwind, and then he puts it in the water on 18, and it's like, oh my goodness, this guy's got to think about this. But Eric Cole's doing Eric Cole things again, which is kind of this time of year into the fall, which is when he does it. And, I hear what you're saying on Tom Kim. The guy's got 3 wins. He defended last fall at the Shriners, right? But you kind of consider him with the President's Cup, swagger and everything, for him to be a bigger player on the scene here. And, forget the cut line and everything. How about the final 3 placed people? 2 guys tied at 68th, Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, and then 70th place, last week, Max Homa. What kind of world do we live in here in 2024 where those are the 3 worst guys in the first round of the playoffs, and they were bad?
Hell of a bottom of the leaderboard that last week. Hell of a bottom. Yeah. Spieth was just sort of cruising toward the end of the season. His wrist is an issue. That's the least surprising of the 3. Rory, the biggest. I don't know what happened there. He just had his worst driving week, his worst everything week. And Holmes had a pretty bad year as well, and certainly getting worse as time goes by. And he's roughly in 43rd place or something, so he's going to have a very hard, week to get to the top 30.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised with Homa or Spieth. Both of them still struggling on the range when I'm out there watching. Rory had some bounce in his step, and he's got good course history there. That was a little bit of a surprise. But speaking of surprises, is there anybody in your mind? Let's shift gears now to the BMW Championship. We have 50 guys here, and it's got to get cut down to the top 30. So once again, we're going to lose 20 guys. But who are those 20 going to be? Do you think a couple guys can jump in here? And if so, who are you targeting to get from 31 to 50 inside that top 30 for East Lake?
Again, traditionally, there's not a lot of movement here.
Yep.
There have been years with 1, 2, maybe 3. I don't know if there've been more than 3. I'm just talking off the top of my head here, but there's just not usually a lot of jump. But obviously, number 31 has the best chance, not only because he's number 31, but because he's Tommy Fleetwood, who's clearly one of the better, we would think would be a top 30 guy. Going down to number 36, Matt Fitzpatrick is another guy we know is a top 30 guy when healthy. It's a question of his thumb, which has been an issue. We don't know how much of an issue, but it's sort of come to light that it's an issue. And if he can get it ready for this week, at least, I think he has a chance to move up. I don't know if Will Zalatoris at 37 can putt well enough. I think you're going to have to make a ton of putts this week to get up there. Looking at the other side, who's inside, I would think that maybe Tom Hoagie has a lot to worry about at 28. I don't know how low he can get on this course, and we'll get into that, this is going to be a real big-time birdie fest. The other guys in that area, Denny McCarthy at 30, Brian Harman at 29, Pendrith at 27. These guys are good putters. Putters. So, that doesn't mean they're going to get in. Denny McCarthy seems to be a snake bit guy. Things always seem to go wrong for him, but I think Hoagie is really the guy I'm looking at that could really tumble out.
I have similar thoughts as you. I think Fleetwood is definitely a guy, a feature that jumps in. I mean, he lost 8 strokes putting last week, like the worst putting performance of his career, but his ball striking was on point. And you're going to need confidence in your ball striking this week as we start making all the adjustments for elevation. We'll get to that more in a minute. And then the other guy is Alex Zalatoris. I think he's trending in that direction. Now, the guys on the way out, I'm with you on Tom Hoagie. I think this is, he's just been okay so far in the summer months. And then the other guy is Matthew Pavone. He's really struggled. He was bad at the Olympics. He wasn't great last week at the St. Jude. He's in 20th. And with quadruple points, it's not hard for there to be some movement if you come in you come in 47, 48, 49, 50th, right there next to Max Homa this week. I mean, you're going to drop some serious spots. There's no doubt about that. Now, you bring up Denny McCarthy, and you're talking about Fitzpatrick and the thumb. And all of this is really frustrating in our world because, every other sport has injury reports. And this week, Todd Lewis comes out and says, oh, Denny McCarthy, he has a torn labrum, and he's hurting in his left hip. Okay, well, in the flash interview area, reporters go in and they start to ask him. They say, how are you hurt and everything? And he's like, well, I don't really want to get into that. How do you not get to get into it, right? I mean, the same thing with Fitzpatrick and his thumb. I remember back at Valhalla when they were trying to get to Aubert and, and the knee and the meniscus and everything. And these guys, they're like, try to be secretive about all this stuff. That stuff's got to change over time. Just one man's opinion, but the way that they all react about their bodies and everything, as if there isn't a lot of conversation going on about what's happening with them, is something where the PGA Tour definitely needs to evolve in the years to come.
Well, they can't have it both ways. They can't embrace gambling and then do this. I mean, every other sport has injury reports. Teams are, granted, team sports, individual sports, completely different, but teams are mandated, and teams get fined by the NHL and the NFL and others for not disclosing injuries. The NFL clearly, if you don't disclose an injury, you're going to get fined. The team is going to get fined. Now, I don't know what the situation, what the remedy is in golf, but there has to be at least something there. And good on Todd Lewis for bringing it up, because I don't know if, the insular world of golf reporters would always do something like that. So that was good information, of course.
I mean, I think that the reporters love when they have some juice, so they're always going to pump that out. But it's tough to get to the juice, right? It's tough to get these stories out of these guys. I've thought about this a lot, and being out here, it would just be great if there was a report on the PGA Tour website to who practices. Like, I get it. These guys, it's their personal lives. Maybe they don't want to divulge a lot of information. But that being said, like, did somebody come and practice for 20 minutes and not play 9 holes today or anything? Like, I think that that would be very valuable information. Just give me a range report. That's all I want. I want a practice round, a practice day report for everybody in the field, and then I can make my own determinations whether or not I want to go down that road. But like, that's probably a little bit of an endless conversation. So let's shift gears for a second. Let's get to the BMW Championship. Castle Pines Golf Club, once again, it hosted the International from 1986 to 2006 on the PGA Tour. We are just south of Denver. We are sitting at roughly 6,000 feet of elevation. Yes, the air is thin here. I haven't felt it yet because I haven't done a ton of walking around. But at the same time, I know the players are really thinking about it. It was a very fatigue-heavy week in there in Memphis. I mean, there was 110 heat index like every single day, and now we're going to elevation. As you looked at the golf course, right, and you start to think about how you're going to build out your lineups, is there one or two things that caught your eye about just the design? I'll talk a little bit about the altitude in a minute, the adjustment and everything, but about the design that you think is going to make a big difference when it comes to contending this week?
Well, I think, we talked a little bit before, I think the guys are just 8,000 yards. I mean, it's definitely a big number and it sounds great. And I think it's noteworthy that there is a course, but this is going to be the shortest 8,000-yard course in history. What's it going to play? About 7,300. I won't get into the elevation, but, you still will need to drive the ball well. I think there's more of an accent for me on driving than accuracy. There are, it's not free, hit it wherever you want, Kapalua, let it go type of thing. There's water on 10 holes. And, I think there could be a little bit of trouble, but definitely a driver's golf course here this week. And the other thing that really, caught my eye is the greens are going to be super, super fast. 13 on the stimp meter, according to the golf course superintendent sheet. I don't know if we ever seen anything faster than 13. That's about as high as I recall it going. So that'll be really interesting too. And I think just from a fan, a viewer's perspective, I think this is going to be spectacular on TV. I think we're in the Rocky Mountains. There's going to be incredible scenery, fantastic vistas. It's just going to be just an oasis of just beauty to look at all week long. I don't know if the golfers will feel that way, but I think on television, it's going to be a nice presentation.
Well, I tell you, I can back that up. The clubhouse I'm sitting in, I can look outside the window right now and I can see the Rocky Mountains, and it is spectacular. We are quite a ways up here. You can feel it. And everyone's talking about altitude adjustments this week. And basically, to break it down, they are going to gain 7.5% of carry. So if you drive the ball 300 yards, it's going to go 323. And of course, just do the math, whether it's 200 yards, 100 yards, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a lot of up and down on this golf course. We have 11 approach shots that are downhill. We have 6 approach shots that are uphill. It's a tough walk. I mean, the elevation changes. You climb roughly like 630 feet over the course of 5.6 miles as you walk all 18 holes. This thing is definitely a fitness test as much as it is a test of mental fortitude and golf itself, right? It is absolutely spectacular. And Jack Nicklaus is always known for a couple of things. The guy loves to drive the ball. He loved to bomb it when he was on tour. So it's definitely a bomber's paradise. The second thing is the guy loves bunkers. He loves fairway bunkers. He loves bunkers everywhere because he was one of the best fairway bunkers there ever played. And the third thing is that he loves big greens with all sorts of shelves in them. Jack loved to test people for putting. So these guys can deal with, I was saying when you said we don't see a lot of greens at 13 on the stimp like Augusta, right? Well, this was designed to be the Augusta National of the West, of the Rocky Mountains, right? So this place is kind of a catch-all between Muirfield Village. We've seen Valhalla this year. That's another Nicklaus golf course. A little bit of like Augusta National. Certainly it feels a lot like Kapalua, the way these guys can just launch off of these, elevated tee boxes and then hit down to these green sites and then, climb back up again. So all of those factors, when you weigh it in, you have to, like, for me, strokes gained adjustments is like the number one thing that you need to know this week coming in. You have to have a great player caddy team. You have to have done your homework. And the guys are walking around with their launch monitors in the practice rounds, on the golf course, on the range, more so than any other site I've ever seen in the last 3 years being out here on tour. And they're attached to the hip of those things because they're trying to really figure out how far the ball goes. And it's not just the air density that's a big thing, but it also changes the trajectory of the ball. The heavier the air, the more the ball tends to spin, the more it has lift. So a lot of these guys are going to be hitting shots with a different trajectory, especially in the descension coming into the green. So they have to plan for that. There's going to be a little bit more bounce and roll than there would be stick. The golf course is not super firm, but it's not soft. I think it's in really, really nice shape. It is absolutely spectacular. It is a beautiful sight. It will look so good on TV. And what will be interesting is that all the critics of Valhalla, it's basically the same thing in the mountains, Len, or it's like Murfield Village in the mountains. So if everyone loves it this week and they hated Valhalla, I mean, I guess they just don't like Kentucky. I don't know, but like it will be pretty funny to see how all of that plays out. And certainly it plays into the hands of Mr. Schauffele and Mr. Scheffler. There's no doubt about that, because most of the approaches, even after you do the math adjustment, are right around 190, 200 yards. You've got these long par threes with all sorts of water in and around these green complexes. Very, very intricate, very beautiful, cascading, waterfalls next to the fairways. There's all sorts of trouble that's out here, but there is plenty of landing areas. And I think the third thing that I would say is that I think you got to be a good scrambler this week. I'm definitely taking that into account when it comes to, I want good putters. I want guys that have some serious ball speed and have had some really good form as of late. And then the third thing is scrambling. As you said this before, we were joking before we came on. Some guys are going to get the math wrong. It's just going to happen. Or it just might not be a good shot. And I think that with 600-yard par fives, you're going to have a lot of these 60 and under, 60-yard and shorter shots into greens, whether you're trying to save par or you score for a birdie or whatever you're trying to do at that moment. And I think that scrambling is going to play a huge part, because guys are going to miss some greens and they're going to do the math wrong, and you're going to have to be able to score, because the last 14 editions of the International, the average winning score was 20 under par. And that's back in 2006. The equipment's better. The players are better. So I could see this thing being a total birdie fest, and plan accordingly.
I have a question about the elevation. I think it's pretty clear cut. I think for us to understand, and the golfers, when you say 7.5%, 300-yard drive to 323 or whatever that was or something, but will the elevation change on the shorter shots, 40-yard shots, 50-yard shots? Will that maybe be the really trouble area where they've got to land the ball in a small area, and in most instances, these guys are good enough to do that from a short distance? How is the elevation going to affect those really short greenside shots?
So the percentage takes care of the math at 200 yards and 100 yards. But this is a great question. If you're pitching from 50 yards in thinner air, you're not going to be able to spin the ball as much. So you're going to have to practice at elevation. So some of the guys that we hear a lot of chatter about are guys that live out here in the mountain areas, whether it's Utah, whether it's here in Denver. I mean, those are the names that are really popular this week because they're used to playing those types of shots, or guys that go to Tahoe a lot, guys that tend to travel to elevation, because it is a very thoughtful question, Len. The ball it doesn't have as much air to grab. Okay. So it's tougher for the guys to spin it as much, and it is tougher to give it lift without giving it more speed. Well, a lot of those touch shots in and around the greens, 30 yards, 50 yards, 70 yards, where you really see those guys control their arm speed, the delivery speed of the club head into the ball, they're used to a certain level of spin where the ball goes boom, boom, grabs, right? Well, that's going to be a little bit different this week. So the elevation isn't as much an adjustment factor for length at 50 yards. It is more about finding where you're going, where your spots are, and managing all of the rollout.
Just terrific, fantastic. And I it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out on TV, and presumably, these guys will be better at it on Sunday than they
Yeah.
will be on Thursday. But ultimately, it could be swing the tournament one way or the other. Some guy just calculates something wrong at the wrong moment when you're trying to calculate this and also have all the other pressures of trying to win a golf tournament what all of that as well. But
I mean,
still,
I was just say those two par threes on the back, right? 11, it drops like 70 feet from tee to green. It's surrounded by water. It's over 200 yards. The math is like you have to be precise, right? And when it comes down to it, the two guys playing the best have the biggest advantage, Scotty and Xander. There's no doubt about it. And they lead off our 10K range. So when we start to make some choices, a lot of people probably they get in the comments here, Len, and they want to go, all right, Len, who do you want? Do you want Scotty or do you want Xander this week? They were both great last week. You get Scotty on Bermuda greens, and he still struggles with the putter. But, man, the ball striking for both of them was exquisite. I mean, I saw it live. These guys are unbelievably good, how much they're separating themselves from the field. And some pretty special stuff. But at 10K land, there are some other guys there that I mean, Hideki won. You've got Victor Hovland that came back to life. I'm glad I don't have your job on the DFS side because you got some choices to make. Who are you featuring in the 10K land?
For a field with only 50 guys, there are a lot of guys in the 10Ks, so like six guys or something like that. And, I don't think I'm, saying anything that everybody doesn't always know. You have to already know you have to consider Scheffler and Schauffele every week. And they're just there every week. And it really doesn't matter what the course is, what the conditions are, what the anything are. It's them. And they are there, and of course I do like them both this week. We don't know what happened with Rory last week. It was just that was as stunning as almost anything, as Tom Kim's implosion, as Matsuyama recovering, as anything. Just a week long of what's going on with Rory. But anyway, Scheffler, Schauffele, I think they're just given 1 and 1A. Might give a little bit of an edge this week to Schauffele because of the putting. I think there'll be a heavy emphasis on putting. The over-under that I saw, 23.5. That really was surprising to me. I didn't think it would be quite that high. I was looking 18-ish, something like that. But that said, Scheffler has gotten to 20 under plus 4 times already this year, going all the way back to Kapalua and the Amex and the Travelers. So, he's so good everywhere else, he can get there. And Victor Hovland, at the last possible moment, played his way into the BMW, has already played his way into the Tour Championship. We were talking earlier how his just numbers, his stats are not that bad. They're just not that bad for someone who had only one top 10 all year. His driving is great. His putting, he's a top 30 putter on the PGA Tour with the rest of his game. We know about his around the green play. It's abysmal, but that should not be what's holding him back from playing well every week. So, some guys just don't score as well as they play. I think that's been the case with Hovland, but I do like him this week. And I think on a big driving course, I think a lot of people are going to like him again this week.
Down in the 9K land, we're hearing a ton of chatter about Tony Finau. He grew up in Utah. He lives in Utah. All about this elevation golf, the adjustments. We've gone at it, already. I don't want to be redundant, but are you feeling Finau this week, or who are you featuring in the 9K range?
Yeah, I was really feeling Finau last week, and I think a lot of people were too. And one of the hardest things for me and probably a lot of people is to go back to a guy who burned you the previous week and go, well, this situation is better. And so it's a little hard. I think the putting, he's actually a pretty good putter again. This year he's vastly improved from what we remember a few years ago. But he's not one of my top 2 plays in the 9s. The other guy, the local guy, Wyndham Clark, not only is he have probably more familiarity with the Denver area and with Castle Pines than any other player, but he is once again playing very well. He started out the season great, just fell apart in the middle of the year, which happens to be the majors, unfortunately for him. But he has had top 10s in 3 of his last 4 starts on the PGA Tour, including last week. And he had 14th at the Olympics. So he is playing very well. and he has it's a home game for him as well. And Sam Burns is always a risky play for me because he just has really high highs and really low lows. And I would have thought that at this age, 26, 27 years old, that really strong inconsistency would have been gone by now. But for some players, that's who they are. And maybe in a GPP play, he's one of the best putters in the field. Going to have to make a lot of putts this week. He played very well last week. Tends to play well in bunches. He had a series of top tens at the beginning of the year before he sort of had a midseason swoon like Clark. So I like him as well.
Okay, let's bounce down to the 8K land. I mentioned these guys earlier. There's two guys in the field that have played here before. They played in the International. That's Adam Scott and Jason Day. They're sitting in the 8,000s. Does that course experience matter at all to you? Or, Len, who are you featuring in the 8K range?
I don't know if I can't remember what I had for breakfast, bada bing, bada boom. And they're going to remember playing a course 20 or 24 years ago in Adam Scott's case. When I looked at the 8,000s, there was nothing I really liked. I didn't like much of anything there. I don't know what it was. I go, this is weird. No, I don't like him. Don't like him. Don't like him. And then I went and looked back, and I said to myself, this is a real dead zone here, the 8,000s. And then I went back and looked at my article from last year, even though it was a completely different course. And I wrote the 8,000s are a dead zone. I didn't like the 8,000s last year. And I don't know if it's because there's 50 guys and you really want to focus on the big guys and get them in there. And then if you do, then you got to go low to get the low guys in there, and sort of the middle ground sort of gets lost. But so maybe it is the format there. But I did land on one guy because I always want to have at least one guy in there, and that's Akshay Bhatia, who's played well at elevation in Truckee, California. At what was that? The Barracuda, that he won last year, and then Truckee is up at 5,800 square feet. We talked about this being a hard walk. He's 22 years old. He could probably play 36 more than some of these other guys can play 18. And plus, he's playing pretty well. He had a good week last week. Very, normally a very good putter. So he's my one favorite play, lukewarm in the 8,000s.
Okay, we'll skip down to the 7s then. And that's interesting how you notice that trend 2 years in a row, 50 guys in the field, obviously all very elite. And I noticed right away that I said, man, there's so many guys in the 10s and the 9s. That's crazy. Like it seems like a lot. So there has to be a void somewhere. And obviously you found it 2 years in a row in the 8K range. So we'll jump down to the 7K. In the 7s, the one guy that catches my attention is Bob McIntyre. This seems like a good course fit for him. T7 last week at the St. Jude, a Scotsman down there in Memphis in the heat. He got it done. Now he's up at elevation. Can he handle all of this? Who do you love in the 7,000s?
Yeah, he doesn't seem like the most fit guy, so, that's an issue. But he is one of my two plays in the 7,000s. I mean, he's really one of the longest hitters out there. He really drives the golf ball very well, and he's been putting very well. So that's kind of a good combination to have if you're a professional golfer. And certainly at this course, Castle Pines. So I do like him. And Taylor Pendrith, I think Taylor Pendrith is no longer under the radar at only $7,300. He just has top 25 after top 25 this year. Another one last week. He would be in the Tour Championship if it started today. He's in 27th position, so he's not safe, but he's better than three other guys. And he just is really maturing as a player and playing very well.
Before I get to the 6K land, my lead-in is this, right? Usually I'd like to talk about a guy or two that catches my attention. But here's the traffic that I'm hearing on Twitter that people are talking about. Is it possible? I know the math is possible, but in your mind, is it possible to run out a lineup this week with Scotty and Xander? Is there enough value in 6K in order to do that? Could you put a lineup like that together, Len? So who are you featuring in the 6K land in order to bolster a lineup that could be very top heavy?
I think we talked about, I'm trying to remember if we talked off air or at the beginning of the top. I think it was at the top of this, Eric Cole, just playing so good and deep into the 6,000s at 6,500, 6,600, something like 6,500, I think. So, he's not even at the top of the 6,000s. There are a bunch of guys ahead of him in the 6,000. So he is pretty buried down there. And I do like him. And I also like Max Gracerman at 6,300. Just an incredible accomplishment that he has made it this far. It probably will end. He's like 47th in points. He would need a spectacular week this week. But one thing that I really noticed, even though we're talking DFS here, he is on the DraftKings Sportsbook at 75-1. That's not a big number for a $6,300 guy. That is lower odds than Keegan Bradley, Sepp Straka, Eric Cole, and Taylor Pendrith, who was $1,000 more. So when the sports books do something like this, they tend to be smart guys who work in the sports book industry. I pay attention to that. So so Max Gracerman at 6,300 and Eric Cole are my two picks. And to get back to your original question, yeah, the math is always there. We can always put Scheffler and Schauffele together and then just go way low. And yes, it's always mathematically possible. But I think this format with 50 golfers, not format, but just the field with only 50 guys, lets us do it. You want to put Schauffele and Scheffler in a lineup 12-3 and 11-1 with Cole and Gracerman and Pendrith. You can even get into 7,300 with Pendrith, and then you have about, I did the math before we came on, 6,500 left over. You want to throw a dart, throw a few shekels on Max Homa at 6,400 to fill out your lineup.
No.
With no, okay.
Not Max Homa, but I'll take Eric Cole at 65.
Well, he's already in there. So there are some other guys. Who else is down there? Like Adam Hadwin and Chris Kirk and Steven Yeager and Pavone are all, you'd have to get 6,500 or under to get that, with the five guys, Scheffler, Schauffele, Pendrith, Cole, Gracerman. But they're playing 4 rounds. And if they finish 30th from, Steven Yeager at 6,000 finishes 30th, he's justifying his price, whether that's enough to win you something. So absolutely, if there is 1 week all year to do it, to play Schauffele and Scheffler and Scheffler and Schauffele and say all that 5 times fast, this is the week to do it.
Well, Len, you handled that with tremendous aplomb. There's no doubt about it. Let's jump over to the betting side. The first guy that I'm going to feature this week, his number, he started right at 20 at plus 2,000. He's already being bet down to plus 1,800. That's Victor Hovland. And I'm willing to give up the 2 strokes or so on around the green play because it looks like Victor's confidence is back. And what I saw last week, he was just swinging absolutely with extreme confidence. I mean, like I saw last year at Olympia Fields, like I saw, at Muirfield Village, which is the Jack Nicklaus design. Like when he finished 3rd place at Valhalla this year, which is Jack Nicklaus design. I think Victor Hovland's going to be very comfortable here this week. And I think that after last week's finish, he is going to attack this place. And he is the type of player that can get it going, that can get to, 21, 22, 23 under. And I just love his chances. The second guy, of course, is that I want to go with is your hometown guy, and that's Wyndham Clark. Wyndham Clark, I wrote the Golf Digest article on the odds drop yesterday. He was plus 4,000. He's already down on some markets to plus 3,000. He has lost 1,000 points. And that is a huge drop. And yes, everyone's on the narrative of the Denver, he doesn't live here, but you know what? He grew up here playing altitude golf. He knows the golf course more so than most of the field. But what's most important is what you mentioned. He's got 3 top 10s in his last 4 starts on the PGA Tour. He was 14th at the Olympics. Over his last 5 starts, and this includes a bomb start at the Olympics, he's gaining over 5 strokes total on the field in those 5 starts. He's bombing the ball off the tee and finding the fairway, and he is the type of guy with the putter that can handle these multi-tiered greens. So drive for show, putt for dough, right? I love a little bit of Wyndham Clark this week. And, I went and got him on Monday because when I wrote the article, I said, this guy, he's going to drop like a lead balloon. His number is going to continue to go down. His number will be in the low or in the high 20s by the time we get to Thursday morning and they lock and then these guys go out and pre-tournament becomes live betting. I mean, I think that Wyndham Clark really makes a lot of sense this week along with Victor Hovland.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Yeah. You know, I always said about Wyndham Clark, even before he really broke through last year. I mean, his two best clubs have been his driver and his
Yep.
putter. And that's a pretty good thing to have if you're a professional golfer.
Oh, especially on a golf course designed by Jack Nicklaus, where he's featuring those skill sets. There's no doubt about that. Now, hey, when I think of skill sets, I think of every weekday or every Tuesday on the rundown. I think of you there, Len Hochberg, right? We've got one more big week. Now, I know you and I, we've been texting one another, and it's been about a year, right, that we've been doing the rundown. It actually was the St. Jude was our first rundown a year ago. So I, I I missed it. My bad. But now we are now a year and a week into the rundown. We appreciate everybody tuning in all the time, watching us either live or streaming it afterward. We're happy to come here, give you some names, give you some things to think about, do it all in under half an hour, and let you all consume some content that you love. We love doing it. I love doing it with you, Len Hochberg. The Super Bowl's next week, the Tour Championship, a brand new redesign of East Lake. Go start doing your homework. I'll do mine. And I'm going to save some steps this week because I think the air is going to get to me at some point.
Well, enjoy the week out there. It's going to be a spectacular week at Castle Pines. I'm envious of you. And it's been a great year for me as well, Keith. And it really flew by, which is always a good sign that that it's going really well. So cheers to you. All I have is water here.
All right. Well, hey, right back at you. And we'll continue next week. The RotoWire Rundown will be back for East Lake and the Tour Championship. The top 30 go for $25 million in the FedEx Cup title. As for now, I'm Keith Stewart from Read the Line. Of course, Len Hochberg. We'll see you in a week.